Good evening. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to extend a cheerful welcome to you all for this evening's program. This is the fourth consecutive day of our International Women's Day celebration. We begin our international webinar today on the theme of the webinar is gender equality. It is a two-day webinar in which we have four speakers. Today we have two resource persons. One is Dr. Smita M. Patil, Assistant Professor, School of Gender and Developmental Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University, generally referred to as IGNOU, New Delhi. She is going to speak on the topic protecting the rights of women of oppressed sections of society. The other speaker of this evening is Ms. Narmada, a writer and author from US. Her topic is NRI women challenges in establishing their profession in the US. So I'm very thankful to both the speakers for accepting our invitation and joining us to deliver their keynote address this evening. Before we start, let me greet all of you on this special occasion. Happy Women's Day to you all. The Global Fund for Women poignantly wrote, "Women's rights are the fundamental human rights that were enshrined by the United Nations for every human being on the planet nearly 70 years ago. These rights include the right to live free from violence, slavery, and discrimination, to be educated, to own property, to vote, to earn a fair and equal wage." But we are still waging war against inequality and denial of rights. We have Dr. Smita Patil, who can be called an academic crusader, contributing in her own way for the cause of women's rights. I'm very happy and pleased to welcome Dr. Smita Patil for this evening's program. I also take immense pleasure in welcoming Ms. Narmada, who will be joining us at around 7 o'clock. Because she's in the US, due to the time difference, she can join only at that particular hour. I also welcome her, and I welcome each and every participant who are very keen in listening to these intellectuals and have joined us through our Google Meet as well as the YouTube live link. Thank you everyone for joining us. I welcome you all on behalf of the Ethiraj College for Women, staff and students who belong to the Center for Women's Studies of Ethiraj College. Thank you for being with us. Once again, I welcome you all. And may I now request Shavita from BCom Corporate Secretaryship course, who is also the student coordinator of the Center for Women's Studies, to introduce the speaker, Dr. Smita Patil. Shavita?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, one and all. I, Shavita Sri R, student coordinator from Center for Women Studies, feel privileged to be standing in front of you all and to introduce our speaker, Dr. Smita M. Patil. Dr. Smita M. Patil is currently an assistant professor in School of Gender and Development Studies, the Indira Gandhi National Open University, IGNOU, New Delhi, India. She earned her MPhil and PhD from Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She is recipient of prestigious fellowship such Asian Leadership Fellowship Program, Japan 2017, Research Excellence Program, USC, India, PEIN Fellowship, University of Santiago de Compostela, Spain 2014, the Australia India Council Junior Fellowship at National Centre for Australian Studies of Monash University, Melbourne 2011 to 2012, Doctoral Fellowship of Centre for the Study of Developing Societies, CSDS, and Indian Council of Social Science Research, ICSSR, Delhi, and so on. She has extensively published on the areas of caste, gender, politics, education, and so on. Her most recent publications are on class, caste, and gender, published in the Whaley Blackwell Encyclopedia of Gender and Sexuality Studies. First edition, edited by Nancy A. Naples, published by John Wiley and Sons Limited, 2016. Reading Caste, Gender and Sexuality in Dalit Writing in Journal Intersections, Gender and Sexuality in Asia and Pacific, Australian National University, issue 34, March 2014. Australia and Revitalizing Dalit Feminism towards Reflexive Anti-Caste Agency of Hmong and Mahar Women in Maharashtra, Review of Women's Studies, Economic and Political Weekly, A4, Volume 48, Number 18, 2013, India and so on. Dr. Smitha has published a paper titled Gender Equality and COVID-19 Dalit Standpoints in the latest issue of Economic and Political Weekly, which attempts to understand the larger meaning that interlink social spaces of Dalit women and COVID-19. Her area of interest are women's and gender studies, gender and law, political and social theory, caste and identity politics, education, and so on. The title of her speech is Protecting the Rights of Women of Oppressed Sections of Society. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Savitha Isa, for your generous introduction. And let me express my gratitude to Ethiraj College for Women and especially to the principal of the University of the Madras, and uh, my special thanks also to Dr. P. Padmini, who is the director of Center for Women's Studies currently. So I'm deeply honored to express few of my thoughts on these issues, because I think at this point of time it's very crucial time for all of us, particularly those who are dealing and raising the question of the women's issues, the ways in which that we are engaging with that. um, and I think to me it becomes more critical in in order to understand and engage in a academically, intellectually, keeping that passion, and how we are going to go actually and look at uh, from the larger perspective. Um, that why do we need, in fact, rights? Um, we all of us knows that historically we have been marginalized. There's a sort of subjugation to the woman. There's a discrimination, and it's not that today we are only fighting. There's a whole legacy and the history across the globe when one talks about the rights of the woman. If we look at the the 17th century, coming to the British era and the entire Europe, there's the whole ideas in which one can draw upon is the the philosophical foundation. Now, in the Greek tradition, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, and much before Aristotle or Plato talk about the rights of women, but the ways in which that they were engaging with the rights of the woman and the rights of the children, it has been always been given a secondary kind of citizenship or a secondary kind of status to the woman. Um, and it was a very common phenomena that women do not possess the intellectual capacity. They do not have that caliber or that capacity to think rationally. And as we see the growth of the industrial revolution, and also the French Revolution, the ways in which it has engaged, and how the women actually, started breaking those ideas, how they keep challenging also their own feudal families. And we see eventually that women started talking, drawing from the ideas of the liberals, liberal philosophy, and it's a very clear picture when one is looking at, the ways in which G.S. Mill or Mary Wollstonecraft talked about. Now, voting rights, education rights, it was something which, liberals talks about. And eventually, it was something which they assumed that if women are coming from public to private domain and talked about that after getting these rights, things will automatically change. Eventually, it did not happen, right? So, one has to also see that the intervention and the critic offered by uh, the Marxist feminists, that unless we raise the question of the class, one is not going to go and bring out any kind of change. And we have the very classic books written by Engels and others, and then raising the question how one should look at this power equation of the caste and the distribution of the work also. And today also, feminists are talking about those ideas, and we are trying to push forward this also. Uh, at the same time, one would see that the socialist feminist also and the radical feminist who are pointing out the ways in which that sexuality of the woman needs to be questioned, because it's a center point in which that the patriarchy which operates. So the question of the body and sexuality becomes a very significant area, and eventually one would see that, I mean, the amount of contribution from West to India. But when one comes at the Indian context, we also categorically see the ways in which the 19th century one is engaging with the several issues. Uh, because of the time limitations, I would just briefly touch upon some of the issues, because the 19th century, in my understanding, is one of those departure point in which that one is talking significantly about the rights of the woman in the Indian context. And law is something, it's a side, as many historian feminist scholars pointed out, from Janki Nair to others, that or their wonderful work. But then one is looking at, of course, particularly the three important, the region, particularly uh, the entry of the British or the colonizers, in which that the three important points and the region which played also a significant role is Bengal, then in South India Chennai, and then the Maharashtra. I mean, if you look at that, so law become a site in which that the question was raised as the Britishers entered in this country. And this is contemporarily very significant, because the movement, when they entered, we see that categorically that along with that they brought the Christian religion. Now the Bible which they translated and tried to distribute, it becomes a challenge to during that time to the people who were educated from the upper strata of the community, upper class caste people. And it becomes a sort of, a thought provoking idea. Look, through this, that now the society is going to go and these people are going to go and make them convert them into Christianity. So it becomes a threat to so sort of religion called the Hindu religion. And you see that eventually, the most maximum male reformers are talking about, the women's sort of emancipation, liberation through education, bringing them into public domain. And we have a good number of the books which are available, because it's an entry of the woman into the education. We all of us knows that in the Maharashtra, Savitri Bai Phule was one of them, in which Jyotira Phule, you know, the very rigid Orthodox society, and and therefore that Jyotirao Phule took the initiative when he established in 1848 the first school for the girl children. uh, the 8 pupils were from the upper caste Brahmin community. At the same time, he also took the initiative to accommodate and to start the schools uh, for the untouchable children, girls and boys also. So you would see that the when and there was a constant attack and the fully that look now they are going to bring a change in the society. So there was a kind of attack constantly uh, goes on there, and fully thought of that look, it's very important to understand the issues. And he then sent Savitri by Phule. So she was the first trained teacher of India, I would call it, in which one would see that educating the girls. Eventually, the schools have grown, and there's an ample literature right now available. Because when I was a child, we used to read that in a Marathi language. And I eventually see that, in the 40 years, the period of time that today people are recognizing their contribution. So the ways in which that they develop the sort of consciousness among the oppressed section of the society at that point of time, bringing these two categories, Shudras and Atishudras. The Shudras are the one which falls under the OBC category of that at that point of time and even today. And the Atishudras are the one who are untouchables, or we call it Dalit today, because it's not politically accepted, but so we would stick to the word Dalit. Now the point is coming back to the question, and you would see eventually it's fantastic. The first essay, which was written by Mukta Salve, it's about the plight of the Mang and Mahar community, which is again the caste within caste of the Dalit community in Maharashtra. And she's raising the question again there, where are my rights? Which religion do I follow? When the women of the upper caste, they gave a birth to the children, they have the houses which have covered up. But it's a Dalit woman when they're delivering their babies, it's a wren which is coming in the home. And then we do not have the spaces. The regime is so brutal that if the untouchables or the Dalits, by mistake even dare to walk on the road, then they will be killed. And their bodies were used as sort of bat ball to play a cricket. So one would understand that. And one of the very significant later, which I also want to contribute here, is the one of the later which Savitri Bai Phule wrote in order to understand this debate further. In one of the later, when Savitri Bai Phule had gone to visit her parents in her village, Nemasa, there was a case happened that there was a Dalit girl, I mean the untouchable girl, and there was a boy who was from the Brahmin community. They fallen in love. This girl was pregnant, and when the villagers got to know, they started pelting the stones. So Savitri Bai Phule did intervention, and I would call it that one of the significant intervention which Savitri Bai Phule did it by stating that, look, it's a British government which have come to power. If you are doing this, the law of the British government is so strict, the rights which they have given, you all people will be penalized. So people become calm. And then for Savitri Bai Phule was instrumental sending those, that couple to Jyotirao Phule and asking in the later, and I'm translating all this Marathi into English to make you understand that, look at that law becomes such a significant departure there, where that violence, that point was stopped, right? When she did a intervention. And eventually she sent them to Pune, and where she said that you have to do make the necessary arrangements and accommodate these people and try to provide them shelter, also job. So, what I'm trying to say is that uh, this was a situation during that time. Now, coming back to the question, after independence, one would see that the Constitution has given us the enough rights, and the rights are not something per se. And I'm not going to go and focus particularly, but I would prefer to talk about the political rights to make you understand how it is important. So the Constitution has given us the rights, for instance, the political rights, socio-economic rights, as earlier Padmini Madam also mentioned about the economic rights. But then the real question, do we really access those rights? Question one. The second question which I would like to raise is that how many of the women are really aware about their own rights? Um, when I looked at that, there are several events have been happened as an activities and the talks, and I'm sure that many of the speakers who spoke previously must have talked about the Hindu code bill and the rights of the woman. But this is something which I wanted to speak about because one has to also understand the most recent debates, the ways in which that the judiciary, the executive, the member of parliament are engaging into hampering the rights of the woman. And most recently, a week before, Justice Bobde, Chief Justice, uh, which is holding the supreme, a very powerful position. And we do expect that from the Chief Justice of India not to speak such language because he is the one who said to the rapist, look, you should either marry or willing or be ready to go to the jail and lose the job. I think that we need to understand the ways in which that the masculinity which is operating at the level of each institutions. So one needs to understand. At the same time, the ways in which that some of the states are bringing a very derogatory kind of laws. Every woman by through the constitution has given a right to us, and a special right particularly I would say that the ways in which one is engaging with the particularly the women's equality when is talk about through this right, the formal and the substantive rights which are given under the constitution, like for instance article 40, article 15.3, in which it's been very important to understand these articles because you are not going to go the principle, the non-discrimination, at the same time the equality and the provision which have given on the basis of equality, one has to acknowledge that. And the Constitution of India, in fact, it guarantees us very categorically the equality before the law, the equal protection of the law to all the citizens. So one has to understand that Article 15A, 16.2, in which that one should look at the how to prohibit discrimination, and Article 15.3 and 16.3 further explain the concept of equality by promise of the substantial equality, which permits the state to move away from the notion of formal equality and to make the special provision for securing the rights of the marginal section. In order to save the rights and historical law, these sections have suffered. But now, if you really look at the ways in which judiciary is engaging, because see, I always say to even to my students or my family's friends, we have a good number of the rights which have been granted. We did not fought the battle the ways in which the Afro-American woman fought or the US woman fought to get even the voting rights 100 years, or the children of the Afro-American people, you know, and we were somewhere so lucky enough to have these rights because constitution making process, the special care has been always taken care knowing the past history that women are into the margin. And if you really look at the ways in which, citizenship, then right to choose your partner, or the ways in which that love jihad, these issues which have come up. At the same time, one has to also engage, because I think the political rights, in my understanding, also plays a very significant role. And if we really look at the 17th Lok Sabha election, because I would reflect upon some of the political rights, because we know the ways in which that we are actually grappling and back with this whole idea to, to retain and sustain this whole idea, because it's a lot of, lot of energy, the lot of, what one would call it, the spirit which one has to draw. Like, for instance, now when Justice Bobde is making this statement, I suddenly remember the Rakhmabai Raut's case, the 1884, in which she denied going and staying with her husband's home. And I'm sure that you must be aware about this case. Rakhmabai was um, born in Maharashtra, particularly from the carpenter community. Um, and she was the first doctor, in fact, right? At the Her mother was married, and she became a widow. And at that time, Ratmabai was something around a 7-year old, and it was one of the very progressive person who again did a remarriage. Because see, it's very interesting, in the 19th century the widow remarriages used to happen among the lower caste untouchables, but it did not happen among the upper caste women. As a result, that you would see that suicide was one of the key issue during that time by the Brahmin woman. At the same time, the Brahmin woman used to become pregnant, and there's also sort of sexual exploitation within the family. Now, Rakmabai, when got married with Dadoji, uh, Dadoji Bikaji, that he was elder to her, uh, um, and uh, and eventually, when she came to the puberty, she was sent to that home. She did not feel the comfort, because she realized that this is a person who is not having, who doesn't earn, who is completely dependent on uncle, who is a drunk, who was a drunkard also, and then she refused to go and stay. She came back and she says, now, so the petition was filed by her husband to bring back to her. And it's a very significant case which I'm putting forward, because it was a parallel time in Bengal, in South, and in Maharashtra. Many cases were reported, particularly the child marriages. And there was also been a sort of, you know, uh, anger by the progressive reformist people, in which they were trying to articulate, look, we need to bring out some sort of change. Now, Rakhmabai said in the court of the British, I'm willing to go through and live my life alone in the jail, but I don't want to go and stay. Now, this is a landmark case in which one has to also see the marital rape issues eventually were engaging. I'm sure that as a student of women's studies, you must have read the book Comparison Between Men and Women, written originally by Tarabai Shinde, in which Tarabai Shinde also is focusing on one of the case of the Vijay Lakshmi, one of the small village of the Gujarat, where Vijay Lakshmi was, manipulated by the police officer, and eventually, then when the baby born, she killed that baby. Uh, and then she was penalized, and then she was the first woman, probably a first Brahmin woman at that point of time, who was hanged when she admitted, yes, this is what I have done, the crime. Now the point is that how do we engage the 19th century and the contemporary context, because we have the enough laws given by the constitution. We have ample equal rights, I would call it. But then the irony when one is talking about political spaces, which is again very important, a woman parliamentarian or the parliamentarian in general, all of them, they have to look into these matters very seriously. And when we analyze particularly the Lok Sabha election, which demonstrate in India the increasing number of the women representative, and I wanted to spend some more time, few minutes only, on the representation question, because I'm not going to go and touch upon the participation issue. But for me, it's a very significant, because the woman representative in the parliament, you know in the various political parties, they matters lot. They are the one who, in fact, transforming the in fact, transforming the Indian democracy and its nature. So if you compare, the first Lok Sabha election of 1952 with the to the 17th Lok Sabha election of 2019, we can clearly see that the ways in which women's representative is being increased from 5% to 14%. At the same time, we can analyze the upsurge of the right wing populist politics at the national and the international level. That makes us to rethink about the whole idea of the democracy, rights, representation, citizenship, and gender issues become a center focus to all those ideas, right? So one has to explore this. What is this women's representation in the parliamentary democracy from the marginal categories perspective, which the topic is given to me. And I wanted to say that particularly the tribal Muslim and Dalit communities. And one of the central argument which I want to put here is the women's reservation bill. So the question remains is that, do we need to have the quota within quota through the intersection of the caste, community, class, ethnicity, and gender? And how do we locate then the categories of the Muslim woman, Dalit woman, tribal woman in order to understand this debate of representation further? And one is to, I think, also engage with the debate of this representation within and outside communities and how they are interacting with each other. It's a very significant. How do they see this whole idea and the issues of the equality, justice, liberty? I would not explain much on these 3 points, but the point which I'm trying to argue, because one is to see that the landmark victory which the BJP came with the 300 seats in the 2019 general election, it also shows us the reclaiming of the right wing ideology and the power in the space of the Indian democracy. These are the facts that one can discuss regarding the winning and losing. This can remain, debatable. However, under the Representation Act of the People's Act of 1951, one would see that it's a clear mandate which was given to BJP party, and they have to look at the issues of the gender very seriously. It also opened up the serious debates on the number of issues such as citizenship, which I already mentioned, location of the minorities and the marginal communities categories, and what are the in what way they are trying to, in fact, articulate the voices of these people. Are they really articulating or not? Or what are the alternative perspectives these own communities can try to find out in the democratic spaces, particularly in the Indian democracy? That one has to also engage with it very seriously. And how do we look at also the accountability of the governance in order to understand this so-called majoritarian government? The ways in which how what they contributed. For instance, there are several issues had happened. The ways in which the institutions, you know, which which is a duty of the government, that they have to look for the interest of the people who elected them as an elected representative of the democracy. But on the other hand, we would one can see that no, it is not happening. Um, the weakening of the SCST Prevention Act, of the Atrocity Act, the handling of the issues in which that particularly people from the Dalit and marginal communities, the ways in which they have been branded, you know, and uh, at the same time, the killings of the tribes, and one would see that the attacks on the Christian churches. At the same time, that one would see that. It's sort of dismantling the structure of the democratic ethos, the attacks on the educational institutions, in which the experience of the institutional harassment, at the same time the killing of Rohit Vimula and the murders of the Dalit tribal and Muslim students. And also one has to look at the ways in which the bomb lynching happening of the minority community. So the question remains is that where do we locate the categories of the gender in this? And if we look at further, one would see that it's an equal right which Constitution has given to us to enter into any temple, right? And we all of us should remember that there's a constant effort which Dr. B.R. Ambedkar did it when he was, till 1935, when he declared, I will not die as an Hindu in the Evla. But before that, he was trying his level best that look, uh, it's a Kalaram temple entry in the Nashik, or there is also then temple entry in the Amravati in Maharashtra, Nashik, both are in Maharashtra, Nashik and Amravati. So there's a constant struggle which one is fighting, and I would relate this even today. The Shabrimala and temple entry, which again is questioning the old age debate of purity and pollution of the woman, because this was a debate which was always actually proposed that women's body are not pure, they are polluted. All women includes. But when it comes to the woman from the marginal community or the Dalit woman, then it's become more critical and pathetic. So the women's group and activists then, they did the intervention. They asked the Supreme Court to they seek the intervention of the Supreme Court in these cases. And one would see that the positive judgment which we arrived to retain the equal citizenship and rights of right to equality before law without the biased gender-based discrimination. So it was a similar time the historical judgment pronounced by the Supreme Court of India on Section 377, when the review petition of repealing Section 377 again is that whatever the laws we see, it's a old age British laws, right? Section 377. But you see the dichotomy most recently that which has come out again, even though that 377 was, the petition by repealing the 377 and granted an equal right to LGBTQ plus communities to live a life with respect and dignity and equal citizen of India without any kind of discrimination, even though it is passed. But what eventually see that again, a week before a judgment came, no, same-sex marriage cannot happen. So one has to be very careful that what state speaks, what are the rights, what we demand for. And I think that we have to be very, very careful. The young generation, I would call and urge to all of you, the young generation, that you have to be very critical uh, uh, on these issues, that how do we actually take forward this, right? Uh, and one would also see that the ways in which the Muslim women's protection of the rights on marriage, the 2019, when the government came to power immediately, that was also been passed after the LGBTQ, you know. And, women's movement was awaiting for this judgment, but then making criminal to Muslim men, the ways in which that the ruling government claimed the concern of the minority women in the country, even though the bill is controversial in nature, as a criminal offenses as result, and the triple talaq particularly to penalize the Muslim men under the Criminal Act. One needs to also raise this question that how it is going to impact in order to understand the class caste intersectionality within the Muslim community. Because, of course, this is the Indian society, it is a very structural kind of society in which that caste play a very significant class is playing a significant role, whether you born into a Muslim community, Hindu community, Christian community, whatever, even within Sikh also. So whatever community you, the very important, point which I wanted to argue is that how do we engage with this? Um, I mean, there are almost 63 countries, much before India, they abolished triple talaq. But they did not, penalize the Muslim men because, how do we look at this? So the issue is that for the young generation to engage with this and to bring out new sort of these things. At the same time, significantly, when the government took the special interest on the surrogacy regulation bill, the 19 bill, which again came, one has to also see that finally what had happened. Because in the case of when it comes to transgender, LGBTQ, Muslim people, Dalit community, we do have certain laws which prevents that, untouchability is already abolished through the law, but it's not happening. The mindset still remains like that. So how do we actually challenge this, and how we are going to go and engage with that? Because, some of the state, like for instance, that Kerala is the most literate state, but still then why women are not allowed in the Sabrimala temple, and then why women's group has to approach to the Supreme Court and ask the police protection, or in also that how do we also look at the NRC bill, because now it's a Citizenship Act bill, right? So one has to be very, very critical the ways in which things are changing very fast. Also, the ethnic groups, the community, the individual versus also the group rights. I think it's necessary to revisit these debates. I would just explain a few of my own understanding and the take on women's reservation bill. I think how much time I have? I'm not able to hear, ma'am. Padmini, madam. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, sir. You can go on for another 5 minutes, Smita, ma'am. After that, maybe we'll have discussions if the girls have any questions.
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Is that okay for you? Or if you want more time, we can.
Yeah. So the point is that, from the last 3 decades, we have been fighting for the women's reservation bill. And if we look at the whole history of the women's reservation bill, it's a 20th century women's movement who contributed and was engaged with this debate between the Constitutional Assembly, where the emphasis was given to strengthen the democracy. And if you, and I would in fact ask you to read very interesting EPW article which we got published, and it was written by Mary John. And she in fact maps the historical journey of the women's reservation, analyzing the engagement of the women's movement at the backdrop of the caste and communalism. Now, the women's reservation bill, because I also want to bring out here the reservation issue. It is much before the 20th century. It is the King Shahu Maharaj from the Kolhapur district of Maharashtra, in which during his time, he is the first one, in fact, who engaged with the reservation for the women and the marginal community. He categorically mentioned, if you archival documents which are there in Marathi, which they call it order, which in Marathi they call it Hukumnama by the king, where he's also taking care of even the women who are into the prison, even they have done small kind of crimes, how their children have been looked after. Women and the children from the marginal community should be given the special, you know, um, special scholarships. There should be quota kept within them, depending on the hierarchy. He also talked during that time about the marriages. He said, unless we go for the intercaste marriage, as Ambedkar also pointed out and suggested, and he was, in fact, not only speaking the theory, he did praxis also. His own sister got married into a nomadic tribe during that point of time. So, he was the first one instrumental. But if we look at the Women's Reservation Bill, even today it's more than 3 decades, and the ways in which the ways in which that the kind of arguments the patriarchal parliamentarian have given in opposing that, it shows us that it failed to take the shape as a law. So, Women's Reservation Bill appeared, in fact, in the 81st Amendment Bill with the proposition that 33% for the women candidate in the state and legislation and the state assembly should be given. And some of the progressive states like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, in fact, they were instrumental actually implementing at the panchayat level the 73rd and 74th Amendment Act. But today, even we see that the ways in which that it's a 14%, do we really going to get benefited because it's a certain ideology which is propagated, who are not even bothered to think about the women from the marginal communities. So I think the responsibility of the marginal community lies more here, because uh, the ways in which the consciousness process, the ways in which they have to articulate their voices, I think one has to be very serious about these issues. And no matter, people may say in the patriarchal society, no, it's a proxy, or it might be the woman within the family, or the sister, or the mother they making. Eventually it would be, but I think the quota within quota, according to class caste wise, should be also given the specific attention in the rotation of these bases. So it's been also important to see that how one is going to engage with this in the party politics, what kind of challenges the women from the marginal communities are going to face, or it would be very easy, because this is a common argument which was given by many of the scholars. Look, it would be the woman, if we give more seats to them, or if we increase the number. I would in fact say that there's no quality if we even go by the numbers. In general, there's nothing called the quality of the representatives. I think it evolves you eventually, where you come from, what your commitment is for. It also is that your ideological position, right? Which also makes you that how you're going to deal with the question of the class, caste, and gender as a woman parliamentarian. I have done in 2005 a very small study of the Dalit woman parliamentarian. And they narrated me a number of experiences, and it was cutting across the party. And the three major party which I studied is the Congress and the BJP, and I mean these are the two major, and also the regional level woman. So, and each of them said that look, there is a discrimination even in the parliament, being a Dalit woman, being a Muslim woman. It no matter that you are a woman parliamentarian, but the mindset of the male, or the ways in which that the masculinity which operates, or the ways in which that the patriarchy operates in the everyday life, which is not, um, what we see, uh, you know, dealing with everyday life with as an ordinary woman. But it is also very much there, because when they wanted to raise the question, they were told, "No, you have to shut your mouth." Okay, you're from this, and those experiences were shaking experience, because I thought of initially, because I was a student that point of time, and I thought probably that since they are the woman parliamentarian, they must be better off. But yes, there is a hierarchy, there is a class caste, there is a patriarchy, but we have to make sure that those political spaces we should not easily give to any man. If someone is saying that no, it's going to go. But the counter argument which many feminists again put forward, that in the Panchayati Raj, when people used to say it's women are the proxy, then male are also proxies in the Panchayati Raj. The male are also here. It's not that that um, um, Kanimoli is only the daughter. I think her brothers also are coming, when one is looking at Tamil Nadu politics. So one cannot just, one should not, in fact, subscribe to those kind of arguments. I think that it's a constant battle, and which one have to look back and forth, and we have to, of course, stick to that quota. Within quota should be there in order to represent, but we have to also be very careful that the people who are in the parliament, whether at both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, they have to do the significant. So I think that the community also has to play significant role to build up sort of pressure. And I would call it that the political rights are very important, because I just wanted to cite few examples. In 90s, when BJP first time came to power, and in Haryana, there was a debate that, because it's a first generation people and the girls from the community of the Jat community, Gujar community were studying, and eventually they started asking their own parents the demand property rights, right? Which is their legal right, which is the constitution has granted them the equal property, you know, under the Hindu code bill, Hindu rights. And eventually, you would see that the own parents started killing their own daughters, even though they were married and having children, because how they dare to ask, their own property share. And as a result, you will see that the state also, has to take a guarantee, or state has to provide a guarantee and ensure that the right should be given to women. And since then, that couple of times, at the state level, there was an effort done that one should do away with the property rights of the woman from Haryana. Now, one has to be very cautious. Each, I would say that not only, I mean, the South Maharashtra is a far off, but still the ways in which we are still engaging and grappling with the violence against women, because even in the cases of the rape laws now, after Nirbhaya case, would see that Justice Verma committee has done a significant contribution. But when it comes to the cases like Hathras, um, we really need to have the specific laws in which one has to engage with that in order to stop the crime against the woman from particularly oppressed section. And I would just stop and leave it, and I would like to take the questions from all of you. Just and I hope that you enjoyed this lecture, because I just want to throw upon few of the question. I just want to raise few question and make you think, because in the rape laws also, after bringing so much change, now it becomes something uh, which is very serious issue, that you rape any woman, and if it's coming from the oppressed section of the society, you just rape them and kill them or burn them alive, so that all the evidences will be destroyed. So after raping, then she has no right actually to live a life, right? And I think that one has to look at all these debates, because the things are happening very very fast, and one has to be very critical to each of them. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smita. That was packed with significant information, and I'm very happy that you've kind of enlightened our girls about the significant legislations, especially meant for women. In fact, I would like to inform you that we are planning to publish a booklet consisting all the special legislations meant for women. We have started. We only last week we started working on it. In fact, they had some doubts whether it would be like a catalog listed or what. And I think you gave real life examples, and then you supported them with your information about the legislations. So I think that would have given an idea for our students, women studies students, to go about it. It was really a very wonderful presentation. And even though there are so many laws to protect the rights of women, but still people don't fear sometimes the rules and regulations. As you said, in the olden days, people, when you put from Savitri by Phule's life, when she looked at the mob which was attacking, she said, the law of the British government is strict. They feared the law of the British government, but they don't. The unruly mob don't do that now, and that is why a lot of women are suffering, and we are still raising our voice against atrocities done to women. It was really highly informative, and also, as you said, even though there are so many rules and regulations, rights especially meant for women, do we really access those rights? That's a big question which you have placed before us to contemplate over. And also, how many of us are really aware of the rules and regulations? Even learned people are not aware sometimes, right? And maybe these sort of lectures, talks by people who are specializing in these areas would enlighten us, so that we can carry the message to the ordinary public and make them aware. Girls, if you have any questions, you can ask. Um, do we have any questions, Jayapriya?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I would say that liberation is something which is a process. We are not. We have not got the rights so easily. If you look at the whole history from the 19th century till today, at every juncture, even after 70s, the women's movement, if you look at very critically, they engaged with every small little things. whether you look at land reforms movement, both gay rights movement, you look at reproductive rights, you look at the disabled woman, you look at uh, the ways in which that. So there's not a single thing, in terms of, because it's a highly patriarchal society, and there's always been division of the class caste division, which is predominant in Indian society. So I would say that liberation is the process. And I want you to think about one more thing. Look, you are well qualified, right? You have a right to choose your partner, and but then it also depends on how your family takes on, how your socialization happens. Do you really go to the home and say, look, so what kind of socialization process one goes through in a democratic space? Is there a space of the girl child in the family to come up and speak out, look, I want to do this. I want to become scientist. I want to be career oriented. And one would see that. So it's not only the one person, it's a process and it's a collective process. And feminists have offered a critique to the family also. Um, and what I'm trying to argue and say that, look, it's a process. Liberation is the process. Now, coming back to your question of the empowerment, I think that is in which decision. We have to take a decision. I would cite example of some of my friends in JNU. They were well qualified. They got married. They were not getting along with their husband, and they decided to be separated from their partner or the husband. But what kind of courage they have to gather also, because you are going against the community, against the society, against the family. And here is that when even you are financially well to do, many women are not able to come out because we do not have the strong support system to fight against patriarchy. Like, for instance, domestic violence cases, if you just go and do a study, you would see that, I mean, it's in many women, and also that the ways in which women are engaging with this whole emotional trauma. So I would not call it that. I would say that all women are empowered. They have to just gather the courage, and we are equal to all of them. We have to say this, and we have to think that. So we do not want sympathy from anyone. You have to tell yourself, and you have to be very strong enough to take positions.
Ma'am, can I ask some question?
Yeah, please.
The age of marriage for girls in India is 18, right, ma'am?
Yeah.
But most of the girls want to pursue higher studies, but parents actually, I have seen in my friends some of their parents, when they reached 18, they just made them get married because the law is there and they know if you get married at 18, nobody can tell them. So recently, I heard something that the government, Supreme Court, is going to up the age by 21. Do you think it would still curb the issue of early marriages, ma'am?
I really do not know that Supreme Court has been saying this, but no. Even though Supreme Court may say, and in case of the girls, even the age of the marriage may increase, but I think still you could say child marriages are happening around and in India and progressive state like Maharashtra during the pandemic, after pandemic also. Progressive state like Maharashtra, it's happening. There are some districts in Tamil Nadu where sex selective abortions are happening as the girl child born. In some of the district within Tamil Nadu, that they have been killed. So one has to also see, because it's not about only the marriage. They just want to do away that, girls are something burden, and let them give them into a marriage, so our responsibility gets over. Particularly in Maharashtra during the pandemic time, because of the poverty. And it did not happen even in the pandemic, when Indira Gandhi's time also, um, you know, when the economic crisis was there, the small girl child and women were sold in the market. And today the situation becomes same. I would say that I think we need to have a sort of, that is what I'm saying, that uh, how your socialization happens in the family matters a lot. How your parents thinks that the child should be treated equally, and there should not be no kind of discrimination. So I think that we need to change the mindset of the parents, of the society. uh, that can only be the concrete solution. Make them understand that my education is a very important for me to grow. uh, Education is going to give me a safe job. Make them understand this. And
Yes,
I
ma'am,
said to
definitely.
you that it's a constant effort, right? And I
Yes,
would also say to the young girls that you have to be very careful choosing your own partner, because that also depends your further growth in your life. I mean, it's not the case like where we can actually, bring out those issues together and talk within the family. So make it sure that whatever you talk, there's a constant effort. Make them understand whom you are close with, your mother, father, that it's very important to be educated. I want to live my life independently.
yes,
And
ma'am.
believe
Ma'am,
me, that only brings, it's a constant effort to bring.
can you also give us some book recommendations on keeping up with the to keep us up to date with how the political system and constitutional system of India affects us as women, and what kind of rights are there which we should absolutely know? Can you give us some book recommendations, ma'am?
I would do one thing. I would email some articles to Dr. Padmini ji, and she would further email to all of you. I can send some of them. Sure, Pakka.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smita, for taking the questions of our students. Our other speaker, the next speaker, Ms. Narmada, has already joined us. So, if there are any more questions, girls, you can just type them and send them to me. I will forward the questions to Dr. Smita and convey her answers to you, maybe in our classes in future. And I'm very thankful to Dr. Smita for enlightening us with her highly informative talk on the rights of women of the depressed classes. It is really, see, she gave real life examples, and it was really saddening to note that amidst lawmakers, that is the parliamentarians, there is hierarchy and discrimination, right? So it is really a kind of an eye opener for many of our participants, because they are not aware of all these things. Especially, you give real life examples, and that is really something which would be really very useful for them. I think it would have been a rich learning experience for them to listen to you, and I'm very sure that they will utilize the knowledge gained from the talk to create awareness among the people, right, regarding women's rights. Thank you so much, Dr. Smita, for your wonderful speech and spending some of your very valuable time with us. Thank you so much on behalf of the Center for Women Studies of Ethiraj College, on behalf of the college, the principal, the staff and students of Ethiraj College, and on my own, I extend my heartfelt thanks to you. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so
Dr.
much.
Smita.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And girls, the next speaker, Ms. Nirmada, has already joined us. I'm very happy to welcome Ms. Nirmada, who readily accepted my invitation to be a resource person in this webinar to commemorate the International Women's Day celebrations. She's a very good friend of mine, and she was also my colleague, and I owe her a lot because I took up teaching because of her only. I had journalism as my first love. Journalism was close to my heart, and I was about to take the profession of journalism at that time because of Ms. Narmada's good advice. I chose teaching profession for my as my career. So I'm very happy to mention this at this juncture, and I'm very happy to welcome Ms. Narmada to our 2-day international webinar on gender equality. May I request uh, Shavita to introduce the speaker?
Yes, ma'am.
Shavita is the student coordinator. She's from BCom Corporate Secretariat. Savita will introduce Ms. Narmada now to the
Thank you,
participants.
ma'am. Thank you. I would also like to introduce our next speaker. Narmada Punitavelu is an Indian immigrant living in the US for the past 25 years. She taught in India before coming to the US. After working as a professor of English in the US for a few years, she ventured into education franchise business in the US, living in Texas. Breaking boundaries is a unique look into the lives of 5 highly successful Indian women living in the US, detailing their extraordinary journeys. Scientists, doctors, lawyers, social workers, entrepreneurs, their responsibility and confidence, along with the passion for education, have inspired women to take actions towards their success. Her book in Tamil has been recently published in India that shares her life experience in the US. It talks about what amazed her, startled her, made her believe and contradict living in that new environment. Currently, she is working on her book about Tamil entrepreneurs in America. The title of her speech is NRI Women Challenges in Establishing Their Profession in the US. Over to you, ma'am.
Happy International Women's Day to you all. And thank you, Savita, for introducing me. And thanks to Dr. P. Padmini for inviting me to speak here. I would like to talk about NRI women and their challenges to establish the professions in the US. Today, the Corporate World Survey declares and confirms that working women have proved their stupendous presence in almost every industry in big numbers. Currently, we see women as strong, smart, technically competent, and emotionally empowered personalities. Many research states that companies bring more women. There is no doubt that they are committed and hard. Indians had been migrating to the US since 1900. They indulged in many professions from agriculture to entrepreneurship. Women also took part in this migration as family accompaniment for higher education or for professions. History speaks of the trailblazer Gurubai Karmatkar and Dora Chatterjee, who graduated from Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania in 1892 and 1901, respectively. Dr. Anandibai Joshi received a degree in medicine in the United States in 1950. Most of the Indians never stayed back, as immigration policy never let them stay for long years in the US. Moreover, they concentrated on improving their profession on Indian soil and desired to share their accumulated knowledge by giving back to their country of origin. When the status of Indian women are such, American women were not getting out of their homes for jobs until World War recruited many American men in the military duties. Women were forced to get out of their houses for work to replace the American male soldiers at the war field. 1940 opened the door for American women to work in more types of jobs than ever before. After the US Immigration Act of 1965, the scenarios changed. Many Indians migrated and settled down in the US. In the 60s and 70s, the economic condition in India and the US gave expectations to Indian professionals. They were all labeled as successful immigrants. Increasing demands for US healthcare in the mid 60s welcomed many Indian doctors, nurses, and medical technicians. Every year, thousands of medical doctors came to take advanced training. Record shows 2,000 Indian doctors took exams offered by the Education Council for foreign medical graduates to be certified to work in US hospitals in the 70s. Around that time, Indian women were not seen among many professions as they accompanied their husbands in the migration. Some of them were uneducated and did not work other than taking care of their families. Few educated and willing women were placed in jobs appropriate to their learnings and work experiences from India. Women did not have encouraging grounds to develop their career due to various reasons, such as language, cultural reproach, weather, and assimilations. In the 80s, lower middle class and working class Indians moved to the US for higher studies, and they stayed back with alluring jobs and attracting remunerations. When the US government invited educated people to come for their higher studies, providing financial and other facilities, it encouraged women to take that opportunity. Female Asian immigrants started to exceed their male counterparts in number and actively participated in the labor market. In India, President Rajiv Gandhi's national education policy of 1986 encouraged science and technology industries to grow. Even the rural population acquired the knowledge in these related industries. By the millennium year, there was a shortage of STEM graduates and engineers in America that automatically expanded the opportunity and welcomed STEM graduates from India. In the year 2000, Indians became the fourth largest immigrant community in the US. Today, many Indian women work as nurses, doctors, professors, scientists, engineers, pharmacists, and entrepreneurs in America. America presented uplifting background for them. The cause of this change is education. India provided equal education opportunity to women that sprouted confidence in them and gave a global vision. Achieving such colossal glory, do we see all the women free of obstacles in their workplace or when establishing their professions in the career world? This question cannot be positively answered with a big yes all the time. When talking about women's profession in the US for the past, we can divide it into two groups, IT and non-IT. There are two categories of women migration happens that also explains the Indian women's perspective on a career decision. One kind of woman is independent and migrates for her job and higher study. Another kind is dependent and accompanies her husband in a migration after marriage. This accompaniment, this accompanying dependent woman is not legally authorized to work. If this accompanying dependent woman is not legally authorized to work. If this accompanying dependent woman has acquired STEM education, it's easy for her to transfer her dependent status by finding a job that provides her financially independent status. Whereas she has an education in the non-IT background, such as accounting, teaching, legal, pharmaceutical, etc., she has to spend few years to get the certification in her field that provides the equivalency of her qualification to match the American standard. Foreign educational credentials are undervalued in American labor market. Practically, It takes time for them to figure out to get a complete detail of the job process unless they learn about it and do some preliminary work before arriving in the US. The new immigrants cannot afford this expensive process as soon as they arrived in the country. In these situations, women do not want to waste too much time and money. They take a diversion by learning short term courses, adds them into another profession that they had not been trained for. They go with downward mobility in taking up technical or administrative positions if they have a good communication skills. The accounting, science, and language graduates could be seen working as QA testers or office managers. It makes them aloof from their dream jobs. Female doctors from India could be seen working in different areas or stay as homemakers. These barriers dissuade them from pursuing successful careers. Besides, the language skills of first generation immigrants are not likely to be competitive enough for success in the American labor market. Their understanding of the American labor market culture is incomplete. When a non IT husband happens to migrate with his STEM graduate wife, he too falls under the dependent status, and he often finds it hard to handle the ego clash by living under his wife's salary in a foreign land. In this situation, women may give up their professional advancement. Immediately after graduating, a student can be employed under certain conditions, and they have to convert their status with a work permit during that time. If they want to continue, this conversion doesn't happen successfully for everyone. Many times, they play around with the loopholes of immigration policies without being illegal. A woman may marry a person with a working visa that automatically takes her into a dependent category, which will not permit her legally to work in the US. It takes time for her to get employment eligibility, and that temporarily blocks the professional growth. She may use this opportunity to be equipped to face the demands of the job market by taking courses on preparing to be certified in the relevant area. Those employed with a work permit often live with the fear of being fired in the laid off culture until they get the permanent residency status or the green card. Asian women career building depends upon where they reside in the US. If dependent women land in a small town, in contrast to the big cities like New York, New Jersey, San Francisco, or Chicago, their professional establishment take a toll as there are not many opportunities available for them in the small towns. It affects their career establishment. Their professional growth stumbles in the villages. Sometimes the bureaucratic work environment tired them and drive them to change their job or stick with it, leaving no further development in their career. I hear some professors and scientists complain about how they had been distorted and worn out by the American bureaucracy. Women again. When a woman migrates as a newly wedded wife, she starts adjusting to the new culture in the new country. She gets accustomed to her new responsibilities as a wife. Sometimes the pressure of adjusting evades them from settling in their profession. Pregnancy and childbirth stand as an obstacle for them to proceed with their professions, and it disrupts their long term career goals irrespectively. With no parental and relative support nearby, they will not be thinking of their careers. Hiring an expensive household helps often is not possible for the new immigrants. A working woman in her maternity period often loses her spot in crucial projects as the bosses may not want to encounter the breaks in their projects. Many times, women lose their jobs as their motherhood penalty that never occurs in the fatherhood premiums. When they come back to work after taking extended time off for maternity break, they may have to start from the beginning to climb the ladder again. Americans demonstrate lower long term orientation than Indians who more willingly sacrifice immediate gains for long term benefits. Glass ceilings and unequal wages were not concerned for Indian women because they are willing for little and temporary sacrifice for a long lasting life attitude. Despite being educated and skilled, due to assigned priority to child rearing rather than developing their career, some women took part time, low wages, or contract jobs, managing family and adjusting their free time. Some women enter into ethnic entrepreneurship and contribute their energy making something fruitful. We can see women running music, dance, art school at home, running home based daycares, home spas, travel agencies, tutoring school college students, teaching yoga, doing catering services, and selling ethnic products such as clothes and jewelry are most common small scale businesses Indian women do in the US today. Degree are also often found among these groups. Some are successful at their small scale businesses and grow big from it and maintain their economic needs. Some fail due to their inefficiency and other reasons. Many people with middle class jobs in India moved here, but few experienced downward mobility and loss of social prestige. Sometimes women get entangled with domestic violence, low social status of women, oppressive fundamental religious beliefs that devalue women and contribute to domestic violence. They try to tolerate and ignore this violent act forced upon them. Some women will rarely even admit marital abuse to a close friend. Several agencies help them to get out of the struggles and start their life fresh. Many immigrant women are not aware of these agencies or refuse to approach them because of the social stigma associated with addressing and reporting violence. Work life imbalance play an important role in women's career. She has to organize and set her priorities to plan her day well. She has to choose between unplanned corporate dinners and committed family events, juggle between work travels and children vacation. A senior compliance analyst in the IT industry says, my career was never my first choice. I give up promotions to balance work and personal life. This is one of the reasons why many women don't make it to the top rung of their organization. They try to be contented with what they earn and to balance career and home. The, the women who are standing as successful professionals are those who find support from their husbands and children. One of those women say, my family has been very supportive, especially my husband has the flexibility to work from home. So he gives the breathing space when I need it. Also, he does his share of childcare and household works. That's a big help. My kids are learning to adjust to my work schedule and are becoming more independent. I'm so proud of them. Women struggle balancing work and family with no family or extended family support, and often they are unable to afford the expensive maid and nanny services. They often topple over their day to day life handling work and home. Ethnicity and cultural habits sometimes block their career growth. Kitchen handling falls on women even if she equally contributes to the financial needs of her family. One woman grieves that she finds it a constant struggle to maintain this balance. In her experiences, time management is critical in achieving this balance, and she finds setting priorities helps. Sometimes she doubts if it's a myth. Dr. Nimisha Shukla came to the US in the 90s to work in Michigan Hospital. She was pulled into entrepreneurship when she saw the need in the society. Juggling between her business, healthcare service, and family, Dr. Shukla says a woman should address the issues at home like how a CEO addresses the issues at workplace. She can't burn the candle at both ends. A woman should learn to use the available resources instead of her problem pushing her down. Every woman should find a way to her happiness instead of blaming or giving up on her dream. A female CA graduate from India who works as a senior accountant manager in an American bank feels she is successful in her career. She never struggled to establish herself in the US. She says, I like to be independent, so it's my choice to work. I organize my work around my kids and family. When a woman lives in America, time management becomes the essential aspect of her life. planning and organizing a day, and more than that, adhere to it as much as possible, make the most successful women often complain that they feel discriminated against working among Indian men or working for Indian companies. She wishes to be recognized for her talent and not her gender. Men don't feel comfortable reporting to a woman. In a combative characteristics of masculine societies, women's contribution may be undervalued. At times, it becomes hard for women at high rank to interact with peers, superiors, and subordinates. Men find it difficult to accept the solution coming from a woman to fix the work issues. The same situation may be seen differently with an American boss. Americans are easy on such ideas coming from a woman. It is a culture to treat women equally. Taking a long break from her career due to her school going children, a financial advisor at an American insurance company in New York feels that for sure there is a persistent gender pay gap at her work. Also, she sees many qualified and ambitious women at workplace face bias and lack of support. This makes it hard to get the job projects. She further adds, it's been a struggle as I have tried to adjust first in the new country as an immigrant and then as a woman of color in my profession. I have found it challenging like other women as there is a lack of mentorship and support at work. Women have to work extra hard to prove themselves. It took 30 years for a woman to be president of the world's largest hotel association, says Jagruti Panwala, the first woman president of Asian American Hotel Owners Association. He had a long struggle to hold the position to represent women as a leader. According to Lavanya Madhusudanan, a research and policy analyst at the Baltimore organization, successful professional Asian American women face discrimination not only as an immigrant but also as a woman. Some women overcome this issue just by ignoring it or by indulging in action. NASA scientist Madhulika Guha Takurta, who came to the US in the 80s to do her PhD, says, I am uncomfortable saying that I have been discriminated against as a woman. For most of my life, I did not actively think about this, neither did I have time to observe it. You need to look, think, and pause to know that this is happening. Discrimination is everywhere in different form and levied on people differently. If India expresses discrimination in the form of a caste system, America shows us it on the immigrants. Madhulika says there is cultural negligence in the US, but you can't grow if you watch it constantly. She further says that she doesn't care about the men who deny to hand over the keys of their kingdom, for she's busy enabling innovative science and make it possible to reach the next generation. Dr. Monica P. Adya, who researches on IT workforce, says you either say something to him or quit the job. You have to work with them and get along, or you have to move on and grow up. Do Asian American women face harassment? Let's see. Women with IT background often ends up working among Indian men or in Indian companies in the US. Comparing to Indian society, security for women is relatively better in the US. Unlike in India, a woman can get out alone safe in the US provided she avoids the crime zones at odd hours. In the workplaces, harassment issue is treated seriously with many rules and restrictions, but still, women face challenges of harassment in the working environment. Monica Piadia interviewed few women professionals for her journal, which titled Women at Work Differences in Career Experiences and Perceptions Between South Asian and American Women. She writes what her interviewee Jyoti talks about. When Jyoti experienced sexual advances from her Indian peers and the boss, she felt that it was part of her country's work culture. It was not uncommon for South Asian women to rely on their work culture and ethics to prove their mettle in the workplace. To curtail this challenge, several social welfare organizations discuss and educate on women empowerment on multiple forums and encourage them to raise voice against harassment at the workplace. Women must be taught to fight back to secure their self esteem and safety. Mentoring is another way to address the issue of working women. Workplace mentoring often supports women to manage their work environment. Many research states that mentoring results in career advancement, satisfaction, organizational integration, and increased socialization. Dr. Monica P. Adya, she mentions considering the tenuous nature of female participation in the American technical workforce, formal and informal mentoring strategies may be critical to increased presence, retention, and advancement of women in technical positions. Some women employees assure that they found the mentors as an effective coach. They taught them how to adapt to a new country and culture and how to manage the relationship between people, applying communications and cultural adaptation. They also play as the role model to aspire to the needed heights in their career. According to Dr. Adya's research, mentors add value to increase efficiency and help to develop healthy work relationships. Asian American women face several challenges to establish their career, whether they are beginners or experienced or rejoin after a break. Despite their struggle and stresses, they keep walking towards empowerment. Amidst all their issues, we still see women climbing the professional ladder with or without education. For example, Jagruti Panwala, who moved to the US when she was 15 years old and couldn't even speak English, she took a cleaner job in a motel with her family. She went to college working 3 jobs. Today, she owns 6 motels and is a CEO of a financial firm, Wealth Protection Strategies, that helps individuals and companies to grow their assets. Goal oriented women lose the momentum of their careers for many reasons when they arrive in the new land. But when the reaping time comes, with their seeds germinated, they plunge into the professional world and accomplish their goals to stand as empowered women. Dr. Nimisha Shukla, the first Asian American female broadcaster in the US, says that she had to wait for 10 years to fulfill her dreams. A woman should be smart, understanding her situation of the ground she stands, brave enough to take the right decision with the right attitude. She can succeed in whichever country she lives in. Naive and fretful women still need to be fed with the courage to maintain their self respect and stand against the odds that blocks their way of progress. Indian immigrant woman Ms. Gautami Vemula Kijo was a victim of domestic violence once, but now she is serving the community through multifarious avenues to make the positive changes in the society. I would like to end my note with a poem that tells a dauntless life story. I write my story, breaking the shackles of expectations. I soar free, I fly high, I may win, face defeat, or just get by. But I own my story. I define my destiny, my dreams, my being. I walk to my own beat and sing to my own song. Never mind the conversation around me, about me. Words of hate may become the wind beneath my wings. I am not an afterthought, never a footnote. I am the headline, the punchline. I sweat my days and breathe in nights. Get up. I tread through, I get tired, but never to give up and never to give in. I live my adventure. I write my own story. And I really thank the Center for Women's Studies at Ethiraj College that to share my views on Asian American women and their professional struggles. And I thank Dr. Eskote and Dr. P. Padmini for organizing this event aiming at uplifting women. Now I can take the questions.
Thank you, Ms. Narmada. That was a very wonderful talk. Migration plays a significant role in today's world. And it is important to understand the intricacies of gender in migration. Your talk was really very useful, and I think girls must have learned a lot from it. Usually, there is a popular notion in India that migration can improve the autonomy of women, and it gives authority. Women's authority is improved, authority in the family improves when they migrate. So, but through your talk, we have learned that there are certain challenges which women have to face, and boldly they have to take certain steps in order to overcome the difficulties or challenges they encounter and emerge as successful women. And nowadays, we talk about something called power feminism, right? We talk about victim feminism and power feminism. Power feminism talks about how women successfully uh, emerge successfully, right? So I think maybe students who are interested in power feminism, your talk would be very useful for them uh, to read more on that for the lecture. And now, girls, do you have questions? Girls, you can ask your questions. My colleague from the department, Satya Prabha, has joined the meeting. Satya Prabha, thanks for joining us. Thank you so much
Thank
for joining
you, Dr.
us.
Padmini, for inviting me in, and that Ms. Narmada is there. We've all been colleagues and great friends when we were in Ethiraj. Very proud to tell you that Ms. Narmada has actually finished 2 books and she's on to a third one. And I think her insight into women who are there in the US, as Dr. Padmini said, the kind of an utopian picture that you have of going there and having a life, I think she brought you down, shaking you from your complacency of thinking, I suppose. To tell you the struggle also they have there, it's not a kind of world that you have imagined. It was so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Satya Prabha. Thank you so much.
Dr. Padmini for giving me this opportunity to voice out my.
Thank you, Satya. Thank you. It's a pleasure, Satya. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you.
Smita, I think Dr. Smita is still there listening to us. Dr. Smita Patil, you have any points to be made, observation or?
I think I'm more interested to know about the legal aspect, the ways in which, because we know recently the caste discrimination case in the US, um, sort of the whole hegemony and the power by the upper class people. Do you see that it's going to go and sort of help in future in the legal intervention in the caste question? Because the NRI also, because and you rightly pointed out that because we see the and assume and imagine the rosy picture which is not there, and I mean the ways in which that, and therefore that when the NRI marriages are happening, that the special laws have been brought out that you have to cross check, you know, and it's a long struggle which again that the NRI Indian woman, of course, uh, played a significant role again in that. Uh, but I'm just wondering about the caste discrimination. How do we locate? For instance, like I'll give you an example of woman scientist in the sexual harassment which is happening, and women who are sort of Indian women coming from the low caste and working in the Indian companies. So how these kind of, because you mentioned about the entrepreneur, and I'm looking forward to read your book, of course, on Tamil entrepreneurs. But then I'm just sort of thinking that how one is engaging with that also.
Okay, the caste discrimination, if you talk about that, Americans don't understand the caste system. The caste discrimination happens among Indians here. Okay, so an Indian woman has to face extra burden. She's an immigrant. The American people will see anybody, non-white people as an immigrant, whether you are a Chinese, you're coming from Africa, or you're coming from India. For them, the white Americans, for them, it's the same. Okay, you're an immigrant, you're an outsider. That's how they see. So we, as a woman, employee, I have to face this one part of discrimination. I'm a woman. When I go work, I live among the Indian crowd. The caste discrimination happens, but it's very subtle. It doesn't happen like what is happening in India. Okay, here also it's happening, but people coming with little broad-minded because they are mingling with a American crowd and for people other than Indians. So there are little bit changes happening towards the positiveness, but still it's there. It's prevailing here. Especially right now, the political movement happening in India that makes a lot of changes among Indians here. It's not for good. So it influences the people in, the Indian people here. I have been living here for 25 years. We never faced it before, but last 10 years, it's been increasing and very sad to, talk about that. So that influences the political movement of India, influences the Indians here. That's for sure.
Now, I'll just come back to again the last point which you mentioned, because if we look at the work of Meera Nanda's work, which is one of the oldest work on the NRI Hindus, in which that 20 years before, in 1991, she wrote very categorically how that the Hindu NRIs are going to contribute, are going to go and reimpose their ideas. Um, so I would come. I mean, you might obviously see that because in outright the last 10 years, but my take is that the ways in which Meera Nanda's book talks about in 1991 about the Hindutva fascist forces, how those diaspora particularly um, keep working on it. I think that we have to also, because during that time, most of the academicians never took that book seriously, and today you see that. I mean, it's outrightly coming out.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I see now, especially for the past 5 years, it's increasing day by day, it's increasing. And even, see, we were all living very close, Indians are living like we are one community, whatever caste you are belong to. It was like that, the situation before, but now it's going by language, by caste, by religion. All these things are, growing day by day. I see that growing for the past, and I'm really scared. I don't want that to affect the unity we had before. It's breaking. That's what is scaring me now. And now I have to face two kinds of discrimination: one among Indians and one with the American population.
Do you also face the discrimination, sort of from the blacks? Because I mean, my few friends who did PhD and studied further, they used to say because being a brown skin, they also face not from the white also, but from the black Americans.
I don't say it deliberately. Maybe it might happen few places, but not in many places. I've never, I never came across such things from a black community, or not even from the white community that much. I never faced it, but in workplaces sometimes yes, because they look at you as a competitor. Okay, you're taking my spot and you're smarter than me. So that fear, that they have in them. that I see.
Yeah, that would be very interesting because one can always draw the parallels if you even look at the Indian region particularly, and I see that very categorically because I come from Maharashtra. And I see very specifically North India that feeling is very much there that the South Indian, Maharashtrian, and Bengalis are coming and taking over the spaces, but particularly the academic spaces, bureaucratic spaces. So that fear will be always there.
Yeah, and also to adds to adds up the language also. If I don't speak Hindi, I am not. People look down upon me. That I don't like. I don't need Hindi in this country because our common language is English here. Why should I learn? The other language at least. So those are all the things adding up slowly, and here I see that big change happening now.
and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Smita. Ms. Narmada, there's a question from one of our students from the Women's Studies Center. She has just sent it to me in the group. She says, in general, identity development is a very difficult and complex process for an immigrant. What do you have to say about it?
Okay, we have two identities. Okay, when I come home, I'm an Indian. When I go out, I'm an American. So I have to play around with these two identities, and so that slowly we learn this. When a woman from India comes out, she expresses herself as an Indian in every possible way. But slowly, when she goes to work and she mingles with other people outside, she learns. So we do the two roles. Inside, I am an Indian mother, an Indian wife, and go outside, I'm an American. So that's how I have to play around with the identity. And whatever you play, wherever you play, those two things, your courage and your individuality or your independency, that will help you survive wherever you go. That's what I want to tell the girls. When you try to come to America, you bring your jewelry, your clothes and everything, but bring two things most important, your education and your courage. With that two things, you don't need to worry about where you live, where you walk. You don't need to worry about the place you're in, with whom you are staying. It doesn't matter. These two things are your most important properties you should carry with you all the time. That will help you to learn anything. You don't need to worry about your identity, what you establish. Nothing, you care about it. Just two important things, education and courage.
That's a very beautiful and significant advice, Ms. Narmada. I really appreciate. And there is another question connecting to that. What about the second or third generation immigrants? Do they have problems in developing an identity, or if it takes time, how do they overcome that?
They live in kind of in a confusion little bit. We think they are going in same like me, right? I'm the first generation. The second and third generation, when they come home, they go with their culture, whatever culture they belong to. And also slowly, the first and second generation is trying to change themselves to fit into their children or grandchildren. And they play it very well. They learn the game of playing this very well, and they are like Americanized. Mostly they are Americanized, and they are also changing their parents and grandparents to adjust to themselves.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Narmada. Jaypriya, is there any other question that is typed in the chat box? If there's any, can you just read? Is there any other question? Yes, Jaypriya? Yeah, just have a quick look and get back. There is one question in the group, in the classroom group. This girl has asked cultural changes in identity. Can you tell something about the cultural changes in identity? Is it stressful?
Not really. Cultural changes in identity here. That's what I'm telling you, right? The whole thing is Indians have two lives: Indian life, American life. When it comes to culture, yes, it's not exactly what is happening in India. We don't follow exactly how everything is going on in India. We are changing is customizing it to our convenience. For example, in India, if you celebrate Diwali with whatever you do, the basic things, they do it here, but they don't do it exactly like how they are doing it. They change everything. They change according to their convenience. So I am thinking, why we have to fight over the culture? I have to keep my tradition. I have to keep my culture. When it comes to, when the places changes, when the position changes, we change it according to our convenience. Then we don't need to fight over it. And that's how means they will do these things. They have this culture, they have this tradition. Yes, we follow the basic of it, but not in depth of it. So it changes according to the place, position, time, everything. We are adjusting to the new environment where we live now. So it can be adjustable, it can be changeable, modify, it can be modified. So that's how it happens. So now today I am according to the American lifestyle. Maybe if I live in Africa, if I live in Australia, it might be a different shape. It will form into a different shape, adapting to the values of American lifestyle.
Thank you so much, Ms. Narmada. Actually, yes.
Yes, there are social pressures because when you come from America, practically you don't what we see, the American life is what we see in the movies. It's not the same when you encounter it in your day-to-day life. It takes time for you to understand and adjust to their lifestyle here. And also, when you come here, you will have people who already been living here, your friends and families. They will give you a little bit input on that. When you get into the field, for example, you go to the college, you go to the workplace, and that's where you meet all the other people. So you take it slowly and you learn it. And initial pressure will be there, but later they also accept you, and you also change yourself, adjust according to their the lifestyle, what's happening around you. So it takes time. It's not like one day process. It takes few months or sometimes years also.
Thank you.
Okay, so the homemakers, there are two kinds of homemakers. One, they don't want to work because they cannot or they don't have education or experience. The other one, they have the education and experience, but they are not able to work for some family circumstances. And some people who don't want to waste their time, they have the energy, they don't want to, interact with other women, wasting their time. They get on do what skill they have, depends upon the skill. They do like YouTubing, or some people will cook and catering, and some people will teach dance, music, art, all those things. They want to spend their time in the way they like to be. So those women, same like in India, but I think the resources are more here. If you want to do something, this is a better place because you get a very good resource, very good response, and uh, it's not very difficult. If you want to do business also, it's not as difficult as it is in India, because the government supports you, the policy supports you, financially you get the support from the banks give you loan and all those supports you get. So the opportunities are more, and also the encouragement is more, the resource is more here in US. So a woman who comes here, you gather all your skills and then be ready to work, you can do it here.
Is there any other question? No? I think with that, we have come to the end of this. Yes? Yes, Japriya? No. Okay. So with that, we have come to the end of this beautiful session. And I actually salute people like Narmada, because you, as you said, you're an Indian at home, and when you go out, you're an American. So with this hyphenated identity, I can understand the challenges which you face to emerge as a career woman or an entrepreneur or even as a writer and an author. So it's a real beautiful thing that you all successfully overcome all these challenges and emerge very successful and powerful, and become models for the younger generation. So with this note of appreciation and thanks, Ms. Narmada, and also Dr. Smitha for being so very patiently listening to us. Before beginning her talk, she said she had a long day, a lot of celebrations and programs due to International Women's Day in her university and college. Besides second session also, I thank Dr. Smita and Dr. Narmada for the beautiful learning experience that both of you have provided our participants, particularly the Students College for Women. Now over to the students. Yes, Jaypriya? Jaypriya? Can you call Vinci Kripa to propose the vote of thanks?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Vinci Kripa.
Good evening to all. I am Vinci Kripa, Joint Secretary of Center for Women's Studies. Takes immense pleasure and pride in presenting the vote of thanks for today's session. First of all, I would like to thank the Principal Dr. S. Kodai and Vice Principal Dr. D.B. Usharani for permitting and supporting us in organizing this webinar. I would like to thank our speakers for today's session, Dr. Smita Patel and Mrs. Narmada Punitavel, for joining and enlightening us with their knowledge. I would really like to thank you for spending your valuable time with us and giving us this thought-provoking session and making us learn a lot. Mrs. Narmada's lecture gave us deep insights about various challenges as well as opportunities faced by Indian women in US, and also revealed some interesting facts about the work culture of Americans. The point where Dr. Smita told us about the difficulties faced by women of oppressed communities and various legislations available are very much informative. Thank you, ma'am, for patiently answering